The air in the upscale restaurant was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and roasted coffee, but all I could taste was the bitterness of betrayal. Eleanor, my former mother-in-law. Even though my divorce from her son, Julian, had been finalized over a year ago, she had insisted on this meeting, claiming she wanted to hand over some leftover tax documents. But as soon as the folders were dropped onto the white tablecloth, her true intentions became blindingly clear. She hadn't come to hand over paperwork, she had come to deliver a final, crushing blow to my self-esteem. Eleanor leaned back in her chair, a cold, triumphant smirk playing on her perfectly painted lips. She looked at me with an icy disdain that she had hidden so well during the early years of my marriage. She took a slow sip of her espresso, adjusted her diamond necklace, and spoke in a voice that was low but dripping with venom. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "Leaving you was the best decision my son ever made. You were always just a heavy anchor dragging him down, holding him back from his true potential. Look at him now, he is finally thriving without you." The words cut deep, slicing through a year's worth of therapy and healing. For 3 years, I had poured my heart, my savings, and my sanity into supporting Julian. When we first met, he was a struggling architect with nothing but a dream. I worked 2 jobs to pay our rent, managed our household, and sacrificed my own career aspirations just so he could focus entirely on launching his firm. But the moment his company landed its first multi-million-dollar contract, his attitude transformed. He grew distant, arrogant, and eventually walked out on me, claiming he had outgrown our relationship. Eleanor had championed his departure, convinced that I was just a small-town girl who didn't fit into their newly acquired high-society lifestyle. Hearing her vocalize those cruel thoughts in public made my eyes sting with unshed tears. My hands trembled beneath the table, and for a moment, the familiar weight of unworthiness threatened to pull me under. I wanted to scream, to remind her of everything I had sacrificed for her ungrateful son, but I forced myself to swallow the anger. I took a deep breath, looked back at her, and calmly told her that if she was finished gloating, I would like to take my documents and leave. Eleanor simply laughed, a dismissive, mocking sound, clearly satisfied that she had managed to break my composure. Exactly 5 minutes later, the entire universe seemed to shift, and the illusion Eleanor had built came crashing down in spectacular fashion. Before I could even reach for my purse, Eleanor's phone began to ring loudly, vibrating violently against the glass table. She glanced down at the screen, and I watched the smug satisfaction instantly drain from her face. The caller ID read the name of Julian's senior business partner and primary investor, Mr. Vance, a man whose financial backing was the sole reason Julian's firm existed. Eleanor smiled nervously, excused herself with a haughty nod, and answered the call, putting it on speaker for a brief second before trying to lower the volume. But the restaurant's quiet ambiance made Mr. Vance's booming, panicked voice incredibly easy to hear. "Eleanor, where is Julian?" Mr. Vance shouted, his voice laced with absolute fury and desperation. "The authorities are at the corporate office right now. The forensic audit just came back, and Julian has been caught red-handed. He embezzled over $2 million from the investor accounts to fund his lavish lifestyle and cover his personal day trading debts. The board is moving forward with immediate criminal charges, and the police are issuing a warrant for his arrest as we speak." The restaurant seemed to fall dead silent. Eleanor froze, her phone trembling against her ear as her face turned an ash-gray color. The diamond necklace she had been flaunting suddenly looked like a noose. She tried to stammer out a defense, her voice cracking as she pleaded that there must be some sort of mistake, that her brilliant son would never do such a thing. But Mr. Vance cut her off completely, stating that Julian had already confessed to his secretary before fleeing the building. He told her that Julian's career was completely over, his assets were being frozen, and he was facing years in federal prison. As Eleanor sat there in absolute, paralyzed horror, my own phone buzzed in my hand. It was a text message from a former colleague who still worked at the firm, confirming the news. Julian hadn't been thriving since our divorce. He had been drowning in his own greed and arrogance, completely unmoored without the moral compass, financial discipline, and grounding presence I had provided him for years. When I was in his life, I managed the finances, kept him honest, and reined in his worst impulses. The moment he traded me for a life of shallow status, he unraveled completely. I looked across the table at Eleanor. Just 5 minutes ago, she was sitting high on a pedestal of arrogance, looking down on me as a failure. Now, she looked small, broken, and utterly humiliated. The irony was poetic. The very decision she had called the best decision her son ever made, was the exact turning point that led to his absolute ruin. By casting me aside, they had removed the only person who truly protected Julian from himself. Slowly, I stood up from the table. I picked up the tax documents, tucked them neatly into my bag, and looked down at the woman who had tried so hard to destroy my spirit. I didn't yell, I didn't mock her, and I didn't smile. I simply looked at her with a calm, serene confidence that I hadn't felt in a long time. "It looks like you were right, Eleanor," I said softly, my voice steady and clear. "Leaving me really was the best thing that ever happened. Only it wasn't the best thing for Julian. It was the best thing for me." With that, I turned around and walked out of the restaurant into the bright afternoon sun, leaving Eleanor alone at the table to face the wreckage of her son's making. For the first time in a year, the heavy weight in my chest was completely gone, replaced by the beautiful realization that the universe always finds a way to bring the truth to light.